What can you learn in the next 21 minutes? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Hi, I am Kiki L'Italienne, and you are watching Association Chat, but you're watching a very special edition of Association Chat because you're watching the 21 and 21 talks, where invited speakers share their 21-minute talks about all kinds of topics. And these topics can range from beekeeping to business building to woodworking, you name it, and you're probably going to hear about it here. This series consists of 21 talks, 21 minutes long, happening in 2021. Speakers can choose to use slides, they can choose to forego them completely. Really, the choice is up to them as long as they don't go over 21 minutes. So, all talks can be watched live or as replays on the Association Chat YouTube channel. And if you think supporting Association Chat is something that would make you feel better as a person, well, who am I to stop you? Please consider becoming a Patreon patron by visiting patreon.com/associationchat. So for this special 21 in 21 talk, we are talking to Stephen Policastro. Today, Stephen's going to talk to us about the importance of parents. I'm going to let him explain this talk a little bit more, but it is important to note before I bring Stephen up, you need to know two things about Stephen. One is that he could talk about a number of things, and this was actually a different topic than what we started out with. So if you want more from Stephen, you're going to have to let him know that he needs to come back and to talk about more. The second thing you need to know about Stephen is that he is an amazing individual, and ever since he became a part of the Association Chat community, he gives more than he gets, right? He is constantly giving, so he's a very, very giving person. And with that, Stephen, hello, welcome.
Hey, Kiki. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. It's a great pleasure and honor to be speaking with you and your audience. So today, as Kiki mentioned, we're going to be talking about the importance of the parent. My name is Stephen Policastro, and I'm the founder and director of the International Association for Creation. And what we do is that we work with national education leaders around the world to advance education systems that are optimized for parents and families. So I want to talk to you all a little bit about that today. First off, I want to start out by asking if you're a parent or maybe you plan to become a future parent, you can let me know in the chat. And it would be great to hear some of your success stories of parenting. I know that we all have them, or we look forward to them one day in the future. So I want to talk to you guys about the coming together of being a parent in education today. And this can take many different forms, many different roles. We're going to be talking about in a more broad, general sense. And I'm going to give you guys a few different scenarios also to think through. So maybe many of you are watching from the United States or Europe, and I'll be giving you some perspective from places like Latin America and Asia as well. Because as we become more of a globalized society, we're always needing to think about, what are others going through? How can we support them? And what do our own lives look like in a manner when we reflect on what others are going through as well? So let's get started. So why, first off, is individualized parent-led education important? First of all, because the family unit is important, right? Globally, we've seen for centuries, if not millennia, that the family unit has been the bedrock of society. And we can see this through history, through literature, we can see this through science, and just everyday life as you travel. And so when it comes to making sure parents and children are going in the same direction when it comes to education, there are a few things to note. First of all, the United Nations Human Rights Declaration, Article 26, it lays out some principles for education systems around the world. And one of its points actually says that parents have a prior right to choose how their children will be educated. So what that means is that the parent, before even the UN came together and decided, okay, here are the rights, that everyone in the world has, the basic human right, education, that prior to that establishment of the Human Rights Declaration is that parents in that family unit had the right to choose how their children would be educated. So I want to give you guys 3 quick examples of kind of what does that look like in everyday life for people around the world. So in the United States, it's pretty straightforward. It actually wasn't always this way up until the mid to late 80s. Actually, you pretty much only had 2 main choices. One, you could send your kid to public school, and 2, you could send your kid maybe to a private school, although there wasn't a lot of competition, so it tended to be pretty expensive. Keeping your child at home was not an option. In some communities, we know this as homeschooling. Other communities know it, as parent-engaged learning processes. But wherever you're coming from in understanding what it means to keep your kid at home and educate them. In the 80s, this started turning, the tide started to shift. And now in the United States, as well as many other Anglophone countries, including Canada, Ireland, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, we find that in common law practice, as well as in numerous constitutions, including in Ireland, that the right to lead your child's education at home is protected. So this is a fairly common theme throughout the world that we're seeing in many of these developed nations, as well as nations that are undergoing rapid development, including places like India. They recently passed a law that allowed parents to have more choice in how their children are educated. Then there are places like France, where we would think that, well, France is a pretty westernized nation. They enjoy many different freedoms. However, in the past year, there has been some government interference, if you will, or the government has something to say about the parent's right to educate their child. And so they're currently working to restrict those parameters, and that parents don't have the full right to choose how they educate their children. So they're taking away that third option. And that's, in some countries, it literally is called the third option, to keep your child at home and educate them through, your community center or your church. And then there's places like China where it has been illegal for a very long time. And some parents still feel led to, homeschool their child, keep them at home, because in that society, there's only really one option, and that's the public school system. Private schools don't really exist in China because of the government restrictions, and homeschooling is something that's done more underground by minority populations in China. So those are 3 different scenarios that you might find yourself in, depending on where you live in the world. There's other places aside from China, including places like Germany and Sweden, that have heavy restrictions on the third option. And then places like Norway are joining France and becoming more restrictive. So my team and I, we work with leaders around the world to help keep that third option open. We believe that the more choice that parents have in how to instruct their children is very important. So then how can you exercise your human right to parental choice in education? This is something really important. And this is not just if you choose to keep your child at home and educate them in a co-op or with your home learning community, but this extends to every parent in the entire world. Each of us have a human right to choose how our children are educated. And that might mean that your child goes to school 5 days a week, and then at home you choose what they're learning and how you plan to build their character. Things that are important to remember is that children are a blessing, right? And ways that we can foster our child's creativity, their abilities, their character, their talents, is by first off loving them, making them feel valued, making them feel understood, and helping, affirm what they are working through in their childhood. Because, if you think about, our childhood or your childhood, we went through some things and our parents were always there for us. So it's important to remember that children are never a burden, they're always a blessing, and to love your child and to lead them in the way that we see fit, right? And so understanding where you're coming from, I think is really important to be able to help instruct your child in that way, because there are so many different ideas and so many different, cultural flashpoints that tend to take our attention away from the well-being of our child, when really we should focus first on our families and making sure that they're set up for success. As we walk in our life, that they can also, grow up and become people who are changing society, people who are doing good deeds, people who are bettering their communities. So loving is the first thing. Second is investing. So you can't really love someone unless you invest in them, right? And the best opportunity to do that is with your children. They're home with you, at least half of the week, right? They might be sleeping in their bed, but they're still with you for the most part. And so you can use every waking moment with your child to invest in them. And that might look different for different parents, right? You might be away on a business trip, so you may only be able to connect with your child through, video calling. But making time for them, making sure that they feel valued. And when you're at home with them, taking them on walks and doing maybe science experiments in the kitchen, and things like that, where you're learning with your child and you can teach your child. It really helps to build that parental child bond, and that they can trust you and that they can look up to you as a role model in their life. And then teaching. So, maybe on the weekends you go to the beach or you go on a hike and you can teach your kid about nature. Or maybe your kid loves art, or museums. So you can go to the art gallery or the museum and teach your child about history and different things that the world has gone through up to this point, and see how, humans have been innovative and passionate for the things that really matter in the world, that have changed the world and brought us to the place we are today. And that your child has been born in this generation to affect change moving forward. So those are all really important, opportunities we can take with our kids to make sure that they know that they're part of a bigger story, right? A bigger life story that has been written for millennia. And it's not just about living in the moment, although that can be a lot of fun, and we should take advantage of those opportunities. Living in the moment, doing things that will bring joy and happiness, but also stepping back and not missing the forest for the trees, right? And seeing that there's this entire chronicle of world history, where we get to pour into our children and they get to be part of that world history. And who knows, maybe some of your kids will cure cancer. Maybe some of them will, be able to settle on Mars. I don't know. But there are people like that who were once children because their parents built into them and poured into them with love and, investing time and teaching them basic things like manners, and maybe not even academics, but just how to best, take hold of the world and, chart a course that will affect history. We even see a lot of people today, taking that and saying, well, it's because my parents, what my parents did has helped me. And I know for me personally, my parents have been a huge impact in my life, and I'm sure yours have too. So those are some ways that you can exercise your human right to parental choice in education. And of course, I think it maybe goes without saying, but you can also choose, do I put my kid in public school? Do I put my kid in private school? Do I choose to teach them in my own home with my community? And if you live in the United States, you have that choice. A lot of countries do. Some may not. But if you live in a country that you don't have a third option, I would encourage you to, research that and familiarize yourself with your human rights and your ability to choose your child's education. Well, that's something I'm really passionate about. I really appreciate parents who put thought into where their children are going. And ultimately, it's up to the parent where the child goes to school. So whichever option you choose, that is what you feel is right for your family. But at the same time, that the choice is there and that we can make that choice is so crucial and incredibly important. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an idea of what parents go through around the world. So for today's discussion, I've chosen 3 countries that we're working in currently: Bolivia, Uganda, and Mongolia. So Bolivia is in Latin America, Uganda is in Eastern Africa, and Mongolia is in Asia, north of China. So in Bolivia, there's a lot of changing in the governmental systems. So the laws change fairly frequently. So you might be able to homeschool your child legally, for a few years, and then it becomes illegal all of a sudden. So are you going to pick up and have to change your complete, family economics in the way that you educate your children? Or are you going to try and work with the government or work with your local school to figure out an alternative? And a lot of parents are doing that right now, actually, with the changing government. They're having to find ways to, if they choose the third option, or even if they choose private school, they're having to work with the government, with NGOs and things like that on the ground to see how can they comply with what the government is asking of them, but also do what's best for their family. So when you have places like Uganda where homeschooling is just taking off, especially because of the pandemic, and actually in Uganda, there's a new project going on that will affect all of the Eastern African nations, including South Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda itself, a K-12 curriculum for Christian school students and homeschool students as well throughout that region. So it's a curriculum that goes through world history, science, math, all the major academic subjects from an African perspective, because a lot of the time curriculum is imported from Africa, especially for Christian school, private school settings, and the third option, homeschooling. So it's exciting to see that they are making waves, and they are making steps forward to advance a homegrown curriculum. So that's really exciting. And then in Mongolia, Mongolia historically has been known for homeschooling, especially with the nomadic farmers that have historically been living in Mongolia. And so once Russia came in and instituted their new school system, it became more modernized, where most of the students and families were going into the city to go to school. And you can imagine the long walks and bus rides that would take. But recently, the government has actually requested of a few leaders there that we get to work with to do a pilot project of homeschooling and figure out how can we get back, especially those who are still nomadic, how can we get back to supporting that third option? So really exciting things going on in places like Bolivia, Uganda, and Mongolia. And it's all about, the parents' right to choose their children's education, what's best for your family. And that is just, it's amazing. It's really incredible to see what last year, even as, some people have said it's been terrible. Some people have said it's been a major pivot. No matter how you describe last year, I think from at least the perspective of an educator and someone who is optimizing education systems around the world, it has been maybe one step back and two steps forward, and that we're seeing governments open up to what the UN and others have set forth as saying, okay, this is a right, and these are the parents' rights as humans to choose how they educate their children. It's exciting to see governments open up to that and be able to give the protection that's needed to parents to choose where their child goes to school. So no matter where your child goes, no matter what you choose to do, I just want to encourage you to love your kid and pour into them, invest time, and teach them the way they should go. Thank you so much.
Wow. I am so thankful that you came to talk with us about this today. Stephen, before I let you go, I just thank you one more time. And I wanted to ask you a question, and I don't always do this on the 21 and 21 talks, but I wanted to ask you a follow-up question and to find out, over the past year and a half, I think that a lot of parents who maybe never really put a lot of thought into all different ways that they might homeschooling or different ways that they might educate their children. I think every parent I know has put thought into how their kid is being educated. And so have you noticed an uptick in interest, or have you noticed conversation changing around that over the past year and a half?
Yeah, so over the past year or so, there has been a major uptick in parents keeping their kids home from school for a various number of reasons. And, whether they're choosing distance learning, or they're choosing to educate their child from, books they find in the library, making their own curriculum. There's much variety within keeping your kid home and choosing how to educate them. But we've seen major upticks in that, not only in the United States and Canada, but around the world. And, I think that is part of the blessing that this past year was, that parents realized that, oh, yeah, I can choose how my child learns. And maybe what's best, for my neighbor's kid is not what's best for my kid. And I want to do something different. And I've heard so many stories of, how children went from hating school to, the parent choosing, like, tweaking a few things at home and the kid loving school. So they're actually keeping their kid home, and choosing that method, at least for the time being. So again, it's all about, expanding our horizons, understanding more of what others are doing, and seeing if those options work for us as well.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, I learned so much about this topic. I love this series because of that, because we keep learning all of the time. And that's really the goal of Association Chat, right? To keep learning every day. So with that, I'm going to ask you, what did you learn today and how are you going to apply it? Because you have to keep asking questions to learn every day. Why? Because as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Put a little thought into that one. I hope you have a great rest of the week, everyone.